Veda, it's wonderful to see you again, and it's especially gratifying because we've had the shockingly unique opportunity of spending time in real life together at the sacred ground that is Confluence. And I think of all the places when I was imagining our time together that I was keen to visit with you is the beginning, because you, as I've heard it before, have accessed, you've pursued and found the language to interpret your birth story. And I do love to start at that beginning. So if you would take us to that time and the dynamics of how you felt inspired to go to that part of your origin story and all the players that were involved and what that has led you to now in terms of how you depict and describe your heroine's journey. And with that, welcome.
Oh, well, it's so good to be here. And I'm so happy to reconnect with you because it was so fun to meet in person and then have, now I'm reconnecting with a friend online. But okay, start with my birth story. That's one of my favorite stories I ever get to tell. It's always hard because, any story begins more with realizing how you were being prepared for an event. And in hindsight, you know what I mean? So I feel lucky enough to have gone through a health crisis in a way where I was able to unveil some truths about the medical system and certain things that helped kind of prepare me for what was next when I got pregnant in 2020. And so I was able to kind of see a lot of these, I don't know, things were being revealed about the medical industrial complex, right? But I was also able to see a lot of my friends having babies in hospitals pushing with masks on, and their husbands were invited or certain things like that. And that was really shocking to me, where I was like, there is not a chance my husband's not showing up to this birth. So, I mean, even to back up too, home birth and stuff, that was not on my radar. And it probably wouldn't have been until 2020, until all sorts of things were happening. But I actually did start in the hospital because this was before. So I got pregnant in 2020, but I didn't have my baby until early 2021. So there was quite this journey of what the world, what happened with the world in between that time as well. But yeah, I started in the hospital because I was like, oh, okay, there's midwives in the hospital. So it must be a little, I don't know, a little different. And when I went in, it was very clear there was no difference between midwives in a hospital and just having an OB. So I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, if I continue this path, I know I'm going to disappoint myself. And I've disappointed myself in a million different ways in my life. But suddenly this was different because now there was a baby that was depending on me. And I'm I just, everything in me said, I can't just keep continuing this path. And my husband was amazing and so supportive. And he was like, okay, well, whatever that means, I'm here to support you. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that meant at all. So what I did is I kind of started a ritual of asking my baby to guide me because I didn't know what else to do. So every day I'd get in the shower and I would just put my hands on my belly and I would just connect with the sweet baby and say, hey, I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do, but guide me to the birth you need. Guide me to the people I'm supposed to meet. Guide me to the information. And I would just let it go. And throughout the days, throughout the weeks, the months, as I continued gestating this baby, revelations were revealed to me. And this baby showed me, he brought me to this incredible midwife. And things started just filtering through about how he needed to be born out of the system. Very clearly, he started showing me and revealing to me how our imprints, the way we're birthed, our epigenetics, all of that, how our ancestors birthed, the emotions, how my own birth affected me, all this stuff that needed to be brought to the surface, brought to consciousness, really, and seen, witnessed, and a lot of them released, and others brought to the surface so that I could connect with more ancestral stuff, it was such a beautiful deep dive. So I ended up having this incredible out of system birth with this baby. And it was like everything I could have imagined. We did this amazing lotus birth, all this stuff. And then one thing that stuck with me was it was time to sign the birth certificate. And I was like, oh my gosh, I spent my whole pregnancy like unpacking birth, the truth about birth, ancestral stuff, all this stuff where this was an awesome birth where we didn't do ultrasounds. We didn't do tests. We didn't do any of those things. I had educated myself, but the birth certificate was one thing that I was like, oh, I didn't question this. This wasn't on my list. So, in most states, they give you like a really small time frame of how soon you have to have this legal paperwork filed. So in my state, it was 10 days. And if you've ever had a baby, you know that you are still not on planet Earth for like days after you have this baby. Like you're still in the clouds, you know what I mean? And at this point, I'm pretty convinced that there's a reason for that they're like, here, sign this legal paperwork really quick. Just your signature. That's all we need. It all makes sense. Cause to me, I was like, there is no chance that I'm a new mother. I'm learning a lot of these things for the first time, just breastfeeding and all the things. I certainly didn't have time to research the birth certificate. And I certainly didn't know or have a path or a plan on how I would raise this baby if I chose not to, or if I opted out. So I just felt like I had no other choice to do the thing. And with no answers, really, I just had knots in my stomach about it. I didn't really know why. It just didn't feel good. So that happened. Anyway, my first gets a birth certificate, and this is anyway. My next pregnancy, it was very like conscious conception. We didn't even take a pregnancy test. We chose to do this what's called a wild pregnancy, where you just trust your intuition. If your intuition says, hey, go test something, but otherwise just connect to your baby. So we did that. I didn't see any providers, didn't do anything. But I loved the ritual that I had with my last baby and connecting with this new one saying, hey, guide me to what you need. This new one was saying, hey, I need to be born free. That's like the phrase that kept coming through. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? And it very clearly coming through saying I need to be born unassisted, just you and dad. That was coming through. So I'm like, okay, I got that. And then the birth certificate starts coming through. I need to be born without a birth certificate. And that was one of those things where I'm like, okay, all the fears, get to come up within me on, well, how am I going to raise you without one? We actually had a trip booked before he was even born. So I'm like, well, I need to get you a passport too before, like, how is this going to work? All these questions start coming up, but I would always get peace in my heart because I knew that a path would be laid for me if I asked the questions, because in my experience, that's kind of how it's worked. So eventually the information starts coming through about how I can do this, how if I can get him a passport, I can raise him in society to still function and not inhibit him, because that was my biggest fear. I'm like, I need to be able to raise this baby without inhibiting him. I don't want to make a choice that's going to make him like not be able to do things like go to school or drive or whatever. So when this path just started being laid out, it was so revealing. And so once I had this amazing unassisted birth with my husband, again, we did another lotus birth. I was able to get him, we did his private records, we got his passport. It just started getting really exciting, but it was hard too, because when I was searching for this information, I could not find anything. There were a lot of people online like talking about the problem, talking about the truth about the birth certificate and all sorts of things, but not a real clear, hey, I've done this before. Which I think that was like the hardest thing for me, is when I finally, figured it out. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to help other people that are feeling resonant to this path, because the longer I like connected to my babies and seeing them, it was very clear to me that there's a whole slew of other families out here in the world getting, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Just getting revelations from their future spirit babies of the way they need to come to the earth too, and how there is a whole new era of freedom being ushered in by these babies coming through the portal right now. So anyway, that was kind of the long version of story of that. And maybe I probably missed some details too, but anyway, that's my story.
We've got time to explore all of those, and it's an endurance sport. Just trying to recount, I'm sure, all of the thoughts and feelings that are attached to that story. And
Oh.
I know one theme that I hear from you, Veda, is the enriching experience that comes from the openness to say, what do I do now? What can I do differently? And because that is the question in and I'll start to set the table here a little bit for my own interest in the world of what is lawful versus what is legal. This was one of the places that I happened upon fairly early. And because that is our origin story, of course, our soul's journey and our spirit journey go beyond just our delivery through the birth canal. And still, it was when I started to tune into the whispers of maritime law and how that then transfers to our lives. And so we'll give people an outline of that, because I believe having that understanding of the wizardry, of the spells that are being conjured up every day, mostly because people carry them with themselves and within themselves through generations. And far be it from me to interrupt someone on a role like you. I was going to guide you, though, if you think it's an opportune time, unless there's anything else you'd like to add, to your own birth story of how you came into this world.
Oh, I love
Because
it.
that is,
Yeah.
I mean, that is your origin. And I was recently reflecting on what the potential powerful implications are of what a mother so a grandmother and a mother experience that is all present at the moment of birth. And I mean, I've only mentioned at some precursory level to people who listen to the show my own musings about what it might be like to be surrounded by lights and technology and strangers and masks and out of your rhythm and out of your bed and in this gown, and God forbid if your husband's not there or if your mother-in-law aren't there. So those sort of dynamics I'm curious about, but also what a mother and her mother have brought to this moment where a new soul is coming into the world, and you were brave enough to explore that and visit that with your own mother and within your own soul. So would you take us there as well,
Yes.
please?
Okay. I love that you say that. It's so funny because you think like birth, you're like, oh, you always think forward. But I never even thought about this aspect of my own birth story until I got pregnant with my first. And my first was saying, hey, you need to explore your own birth story. You need to explore your mother's and your grandmother's and whatever. And it was very humbling for me, actually, because I was realizing here I am pregnant for the first time and I don't even know how I was brought into the world. So, this baby, what they actually guided me to was, hey, write down how it felt. So I really kind of just tuned in to what did I feel like my birth experience was? Because it's easy for us too, I think, to say, well, how the heck would I remember I was a baby? But we actually were there. We were consciousness. We can tune in. And maybe a lot of times we don't have words for it because babies don't necessarily have words, but there is always a feeling. So I did. I sat down and meditated on this experience and what it felt like for me. I was not consciously conceived. I was a oh shoot baby. My sister is 16 months older than me, so they weren't planning on that. I do know too, there wasn't this energy of love between my mother and father. There was duty in some
Yeah.
sense. So gestation was interesting. But then when it comes to my birth, if I'm kind of skipping through into the birth, it felt to me just tuning in like a true like alien invasion. You're coming through. I wasn't ready to come out. You kind of get forced out, pulled out by some stranger, whisked away. Immediate disconnection, that like suffocation of where's my mother. I felt that very, very deeply. And of course, fast forwarding into my life, I realized how all the ways that imprint has affected me and actually has created many things that I hold dear or value because of that. So,
Can you
um,
name one? Can you name one
yeah,
manifestation of that?
can name one. Like Lotus Birth. Lotus Birth is like is the biggest passion of mine because I recognize how big that connection to mother, to intuition, to that divine design is. But when you're like immediately cut from that, yeah, that's one I'll name. So it felt like very traumatic, I will say. And it was really interesting because I remember asking my mom after I had kind of done this exercise, which I'm really grateful for that I had done it before I asked her. So I asked my mom and I'm like, tell me about my birth story. And she was like, oh my gosh, it was beautiful. It wasn't a hospital, but you came out. They immediately handed you to me. I put you on my chest. We breastfed. It was just, roses and daisies. And I'm like, I thought that was really interesting because that is not anything about how I experienced it. But I can also recognize and honor that, multiple people can have the same experience and come out with two different truths. So I kind of just let that be for a little bit. About 2 weeks later, she calls me and she's like, hey, I want you to know that I just started going through old journals and I want to read you my journal entry of a few days after you were born. And she starts reading this journal entry. And it's actually, honestly, like to me, I like just cried because it was like heart wrenching for a mother to experience what she did. It was very traumatic. My dad really wasn't there supportive. He, like, even him picking her up at the hospital, like, he came up and he was mad her bags weren't packed and ready to go. Like, a lot of things that I'm like, hey, that's what I experienced. So for her, I think, our minds do this thing where we protect ourselves from trauma too. And I can definitely see how her mind was protecting herself from the traumatic event that happened to her, having your baby cut, whisked away. There was meconium in my birth, so that was like a big emergency thing. So it was really, really interesting for me to kind of be able to come full circle and be like, oh my gosh, okay, so I was right. Because there was a moment in time where I was like questioning myself. I'm like, why would I feel so separate from her experience? And then for it to be actually exactly how I experienced it was like, whoa, that's crazy. So yeah, I'm lucky that my mom was able to journal that. And it's also been a beautiful thing because I've gotten to go on a journey with my own mother and our experiences together. So that's kind of been a cool thing, I guess.
It's spectacular and special because it speaks to the healing that goes beyond time, because people can ascribe to one moment the motif of their life from their out, whether conscious or otherwise, or unconscious. I mean, I don't know if anything is really unconscious, just subconscious, just lurking
Yeah.
beneath the surface, and it does take some level of courageous curiosity to lean into that. And I mean, I heard an interesting perspective on. I'm not a big neuroscience guy, and not necessarily because I think it's over my head. It's just I don't think it's the whole story. As you know, I or as you may know, I'm much more interested in what the heart reveals, because that sounds like a hard journey. Is, I mean, because your head can then take over. Well, my mom says it's beautiful. She must be right. And so a fascinating perspective, and I'd love to invite your thoughts on this, is that the protective measures that we take, usually from the shoulders up,
Mm.
are in an effort to not only protect ourselves, but usually to protect our parents' generation and their parents as well. Meaning is we have that inherited instinct to say, well, what would preserve them to not only stay alive, but stay content and not be constantly stressed and worried about the decisions they made. I don't know if
Mm.
it's quite a blanket of ignorance or anything like that. It's just, you're second guessing yourself of what we would all do, saying, and it's a cliche because it's true, I believe, when we do say, okay, I believe my parents were doing their best with
Mm.
whatever they knew to be their best. And some people don't. If you trust that your parents were, I believe there is stability to that, and still the protective, yeah, blanket and measure of, well, it's probably like she said, and it probably wasn't so traumatic, and it was probably good enough, and all those things, because and it doesn't sound like you confronted your mom with this. It sounds like she got there on her own with you just
Mm.
giving her space. So credit to you both, because otherwise to probe that wound again would then would send her potentially spiraling. And I think
Mm.
spirals are a good thing, especially if they go inward. It's one thing to spiral out of control, but the inward spirals are usually revelatory. So does that land with you at all, that
Oh yeah.
instincts to preserve, the other lineages so that they don't then have to unravel all of the things that they thought was their best?
Oh, absolutely. Because I think it also is human nature too, when confronted with something that 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 makes the person also either have to take responsibility or they can set off blame. And the first thing that kind of comes to my mind is actually because me and my husband, when I was pregnant with my first, we kind of both had this unraveling of we got to go down our own journeys because baby was telling us it wasn't just me that needed to learn about my origin story. He did too. And one of the things that really affected him was a circumcision, for sure. And he did ask his mom and he did confront her about it. And I think it is easy, and bless her heart, because again, she did the best she knew. But the initial reaction was, defense or blame, because it is a lot to take on a responsibility suddenly somewhere in your life that you thought maybe you harmed your child unintentionally and how it affected them. And they've also gone through, a beautiful journey, but the initial reaction is like, oh, no, I didn't hurt you. I didn't. So yes, 1,000%. I'm also grateful that both I would say it's a bravery thing to do as well, to confront those situations. And some people maybe aren't able to, or maybe you don't need to, and you can work through things without confronting them. But I'm grateful for the scenario that ensued, I think, for both me and my husband to be able to have those confrontations. And even though maybe at first it was defense, but have been able to work through those with both our families. But I totally agree. There is definitely this preservation of, because I don't know. No one wants to believe they caused harm to their own child. And that takes a big, big person and a lot of accountability to say, I'm sorry, even though I didn't mean to, I didn't know to. But there are choices of parents, and a lot of it is programming. I would say, a vast majority of it is programming. So,
Well,
yeah.
and with the circumcision choice, I feel like the suite of answers are very few, right? And if you're willing and able to verify this, it's so you can look like your dad,
Mhm.
or it's to keep you safe from cancer. That's pretty much it, right? And the defense of circumcision
Well, and
is
then the other is like cleanliness, they say that it's, or religion. There's religious, views too. But I would say the vast majority is people just do it because it's just what you do. Like everyone does it. So, yeah.
so one of the great blessings of my life is having a maternal grandfather, my mother's father, who was a family doctor in central Massachusetts, in the heart of the mid and late 20th century. And he still had, I mean, the story I love to tell about him is that he would work all day in his office and then would come home for dinner. And then in his study would have what he coined as talk appointments. So truly just letting people vent, getting to the narrative elements of people's life, and not necessarily saying, well, now here's the meditation or the prayer or the therapy you need to do. That was maybe beyond his purview, but still he knew that there were layers to people, and his instinct for simplicity is a lineage that I take on with a great deal of commitment and obligation of love, because it impacted me directly when he counseled my mother when she was considering that decision to just say,
Mhm.
Essentially, who are we to improve on God's design? Who are we to cut away and remove and think that we know better? And I believe he was also cognizant of the fact, and it is a fact, it is a reality, that that baby is going to feel the pain. And why subject that baby within its first minutes, hours, days of life to such a degree of pain and removing a part of him? So, because I mean, you were alluding to that earlier, Veda, about it's folly to think that, I don't know the origin of this deception. I mean, we'll talk about the natural law hierarchy, at least as I've learned it. I don't know the origins of the deception to teach people that a baby would not have a feeling memory of its birth, of its first couple days, weeks, months, years of its life, even, certainly beyond words. We know that there's so much of life that transcends words. And then pain or any feeling, the experience of, is this a loving environment? Is this a healthy environment? All of those things. So that's where we've really, I call it logicalized ourselves into, if you're only looking at logic and everything is a process and everything is a protocol, then that's really where we've hamstrung ourselves as a system. And I do talk about, I know the system is made up of people, just like government is made up of people. So we really cannot just talk about systems like they're inanimate. And still, I do talk about what is the medical industrial complex or system, because I don't project my frustration and criticism just on doctors alone. I know too many good meaning, well-meaning doctors. They're in my family. They're in my life. I believe they are doing their best.
Totally.
And from there, if your best is invested in, your education and the story that you now feel. I actually just had this conversation with my wife the other night as she considers a departure from her career path. She
Mm,
says, I feel like I'm throwing away what my parents gave me.
mm.
All those years of school, all the money invested into a high quality education, and hers is an engineering degree. And that's just, I mean, she still has a clear sense of what she would rather do, and that's her parents' investment. How about people's own investment? Carrying the weight of debt, which is one of these limiting factors that I know we're going to talk about. So to punctuate all that, where are you also seeing these assumptions, these very narrow scopes where people are just saying, with the birthing process, with the health pregnancy health process, with the conception process, where people are just saying, that's how you do it, that's how it's been done. And only to emphasize, let's just acknowledge that Veda, are we less than 100 years of generations that have birthed outside of the home? I mean, here we are, 2026. I feel like the major did that arc start to swing to hospital births, what, in the 40s, 50s,
Yeah,
60s?
in late
Yeah.
30s. Yeah,
Okay.
around 30s.
So we're
Yeah.
less than 100 years
Yeah.
removed,
Yes.
which is not a long time, which is
Yes.
two
There
generations.
yes, when you really think about time and you have that is such a short period of time when you think of the grand picture of it all. It's crazy. And how easily we've kind of all shifted, like, even talking to my own grandma, how it's like, the thought of not having a birth in a hospital is like, even though my great grandma had all home births, and now, it's kind of crazy how quickly it shifted.
And do you have any inside baseball on why that? I mean, how is our
Mm.
memory that selectively short?
You know what? It's kind of knowing what I know now. I guess it's kind of hard to comprehend how quickly a whole generation bought into something. But also, if you look at 2020, how quickly people bought into, like, for your safety, I guess maybe that makes sense.
Well, my brief thesis on this is the overwhelming inundation of not only information, but anything like trauma-based mind control, where if it's every other fucking week is a world event or a serious event, at some point, if those kinds of things are relatively front of mind, who really has the capacity or the willingness to explore with an extreme amount of skepticism, because it would require, maybe, yeah, I mean, why did my parents do this, and didn't I turn out fine, and I went to public school, didn't I turn out great? It does require that level of scrutiny that I think, especially for the generations preceding us, when they were fed a pretty steady dose of rigid programming, that'll clog up your memory very quickly.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And too, I think technology is just, ramping up. There's this new
Oh
thing,
yeah.
this new great thing. Why wouldn't you take advantage of it? I think that is one of the blessings I think of after seeing all of this technology and how great it was, and actually being able to be on one end of it, seeing that it really harmed a lot of people, allows you to question other great technologies that come. But sometimes you need that hindsight to be able to compare it to. Otherwise, I think there's just a lot of trauma-based mind control, a lot of innocence as well, of just thinking like, oh, well, my
Why would they lie? Why
yeah.
would they not protect me? Why? Yeah, it is. It is. And I'm ready, willing, and able to ascribe it mostly to that. With majority of people, it is innocence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I'm to corral us, what are some of the consistent ways that you see people assuming that how it was done even a generation before or in this generation is the only way or the best way? And let's start there, and then we'll talk about alternatives and solutions.
Well, first, I would say most people, like, just their an awareness too. Like I said, when I started my journey, just the thought of home birth was not even like on my radar. It's just not like I was born in a hospital, all my friends had babies in a hospital. It's just like, just what you do. So even me thinking having a midwife in the hospital was like, oh, this is like kind of crazy. It was funny kind of looking back,
Yeah.
thinking that too. But really, it's just like, I feel like in so many ways in our lives, we are guided down this path. And it's what everyone's doing. So you're just like, you don't really know otherwise. And some of the other, of course, home birth was a thing, but I also was so programmed in a lot of ways to think that was like crazy and dangerous, and maybe there's probably a lot of propaganda in that sense too, of just like, oh my gosh, you're willing to risk your baby's life, your life, all these different things. I think that for sure. So when I started rearing to that path, of course, that was a lot of the questions that I got from people of like, well, are you willing to take responsibility if something happens? And of course, actually, I think that was the gift of being able to do that, because I actually did
Yes.
get to take responsibility.
The answer is unequivocally, emphatically yes.
Yes, which is so beautiful. And I think that's the biggest thing that I realized is how we are so easy, we outsource everything. And it made me realize how in every way, shape, and form of my life, I was outsourcing my authority to someone that knew better than me. And the more I walked on my journey, I think it's laughable to think that anyone in a room where a mother is birthing a baby, that someone else knows more about birth than the woman giving birth. But even she's been programmed to look at someone else and be like, is everything okay? Is my baby okay? Am I okay? It's crazy how that's been outsourced. And it's been a whole journey for me and myself to go from outsourcing everything to learning how to fully take responsibility and insource all of it. Because I mean, that to me, that's kind of been my journey coming home in a lot of ways, of saying, hey, how have I been taught to ask everyone else in the room before I ask myself? Like, that's actually kind of crazy.
It is, and I'm inspired to ask if there is one element of your inner life or your life writ large where you found the most resistance, where you really clung to, I'd really rather not take responsibility for this, and I'd really rather someone else take the lead on this. Can you think of anything, Veda? I mean, anything that hung
Yeah.
around for a while that you weren't willing to embrace full responsibility for?
Well, I would say the vast majority of like the first half of my life, for sure, like, especially like medical doctors, okay? And I threw out there that I had a health crisis, and that was me going from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor, asking them what the heck was wrong, asking them because someone needed to figure it out, doing all sorts of tests, doing all sorts of things. Um, Having one doctor say, you need to remove your colon, and another one's like, you have a brain tumor. Like, everyone had this like sensational thing. And I followed along with a lot of these things because I was like, well, they are the experts. They know better. And so that for sure was one of those things. But over the years, when I started getting sicker and sicker and sicker, there was one event actually that I really thank this doctor for, where I came to him and I was like, nothing is getting better. I've been with you. Cause I would kind of like go with one doctor for a year. And when I'd get sicker, I'd kind of like, start looking for another doctor. And I was like, hey, we've been doing this for a year. You're telling me I'm getting better, but you're looking at the number that everything's the same. I'm not getting better. And he's like, well, maybe at this point you need to see a psychiatrist. And I remember just like crying to my husband. I was like, maybe I am crazy. Honestly, maybe I'm crazy. And my husband was like, you know what? This is like physical. Okay. At this time, I was literally like growing a beard and lactating, and I had never been pregnant. I'm like, something is wrong. So when he was able to kind of bring me back to earth, he was like, well, this is physical. But, I think that actually opened my mind to thinking, okay, maybe there's something more than the physical, actually. Maybe it is my thoughts, my feelings, my beliefs, maybe emotions. Maybe there's something spiritual that's then causing the physical. But for the longest time, I was so hell-bent on the doctors knew better than I did. And I did it for years, spent so much freaking money. And it wasn't until I got so sick and realized that no one was going to save me unless I decided to pull the reins on my own health that was the only, like, no one cared more than I did. I was so invested in my health. So I would say that was truly the breaking point for me of outsourcing to doctors, that I was like, okay, nope. Maybe I need to start reading ingredients. Maybe I need to start thinking about where my mind and beliefs are, and reading inserts, all sorts of, like, honestly, suddenly the
How
rabbit
dare
hole
you,
started.
Veda? How dare you? Inconceivable.
I know. So for sure, it was doctors knew better than me for all of my life. That was my breaking
Well, and
point.
at least on paper, you sound like a good patient. If you were giving one doctor a whole year of taking on their guidance and their protocols and all that, some people do it for a month and jump ship. And how will
Oh.
you ever know what's working? So on paper,
Oh, Tom, you have no idea how good what a good patient I was. Like, honestly, I am that like straight A student. There is no wiggle room for me. If you tell me my diet needs to be this, it is perfect. It is perfect. And I did it perfectly. And I think that was what was so stressful about it, was I did everything. And there was no like, well, maybe whatever. It was perfect. And which, comes down the road, you start realizing how my perfectionism too intertwines with all of that too. But I was a great patient. I will say that.
yeah. And so that's why you can, I mean, people use that euphemism, that hyperbole, to say, well, I've tried everything, or I've done everything, or I did everything you asked me to do. Very few are the people who can say that. And still, I mean, I'm on a practice of doing my best to really sometimes qualify as I quantify these things. For instance, my friend and I were talking about the grocery store, what it's like going grocery shopping. And I mean, one of our great options is we have an organic grocery near us. We also have Whole Foods and all that. But I would say, and might be fun for you to do this with me, when and if you do most of your shopping at the grocery store, you think you buy 1% of the things that are actually in stock at the grocery store? Do you think it's more than that, less than that? Like,
1%.
think about all the aisles of stuff, and I am talking
Oh,
about quantity and volume. Like, of all the stuff and granted, one person is not going to buy 10 bags of chips or whatever. But
mm.
even just if you had a list of everything that's on offer in a grocery store, what percentage do you think you're buying on average when you go?
Less than 1% for
Yeah,
sure.
okay. So there you go. So and that's because likely that you have, this is what I tell people about the shift toward high quality food, is I promise you're not going to buy a watermelon and the watermelon Pop-Tarts. It's
Yes.
not going to be both. You're not going to be, bankrupting yourself and stuffing your cart full of, not even an even duplicate. But
Well, it's
I
hard not
thought,
to like walk into a gas station, okay, and look around and be like, none of this is food. Like,
no.
not one of this. none
And
of this food.
and that's an education, because people say, "What do you mean? Like that? Like that's a bag of chips?" That was, I mean, good luck people explaining where I don't know what a chip came from, or a jerky stick or whatever. I mean, anything that's in a bottle that's not water, your body treats like food, but it's
Mm.
certainly much depleted than that. I bring up that example because when you were talking about how you didn't really think about the consider the option of what would I do outside of a birth, mostly because you were, at least as a reflex, overwhelmed by the programming of, what do you not care about your baby? Wouldn't you want medical, professionals around? I think I would frame the question to you: what percentage of the time of your life, let's say, if when you thought about pregnancy and birth giving, just that one category alone, you know, 100% of the time, meaning every time you thought about that category, you were thinking about, what are my alternatives outside of doing it in the hospital? Do you think you spend 0% of your time before your first birth or before your first pregnancy thinking about what else could this be?
Yeah, 0% of my
Yeah.
time until I actually had to confront it of like, what do I want to do? Because I mean, a lot of it is like movies and again, my friends and all of that was just there was one path you walk. There was not any other path. And honestly, if I'm being completely like frank with you, I didn't want to have kids. I I actually witnessed my brother, who's 8 years younger than me, be born. I
Mm.
literally was right there watching him come out. They did an episiotomy on him, forceps pulled him out, and that was, like, so traumatizing for me to watch. I actually never wanted to have kids because 'cause I'm like, "That if that's how you bring babies into the world, I want no part of this." And that was the only way in my mind. So I actually after years of being with doctors, being told I couldn't have kids, which, was kinda self-fulfilling on I didn't wanna have kids, so
Uh,
created a life scenario where I couldn't have
yeah.
kids. Part of that whole healing journey where suddenly I was, surprised pregnant when I was told I couldn't, that was the moment where I got to just make decisions where I'm like, "Okay, I'm here, what am I gonna do?" So, yeah.
Yes. Well, and I'll just say a brief word for, I understand this is logicalizing ourselves into pain and stagnation, because I understand being realistic with people and saying, Veda, you're in a state of poor health. I mean, it's not dissimilar from anyone who is in a state of poor health, and yet I'm always uh, surprised and inspired by how insistent life is on creating more life, because I see unhealthy women all the time, pregnant, having little kids. I mean, at least unhealthy on the surface. So usually, an obese or overweight body is a starving body, starving for nutrients or love or safety, or some sort of starvation. So I understand the elements of that, and still, it's it's that really dangerous power of diagnosis. I mean, if you were a lesser being, Veda, I mean, think about how it could have altered your life to say you will
Oh,
never have children.
no.
If and like you said, I mean, you were predisposed to trust that opinion, since you
Mhm.
were so earnestly seeking the guidance of someone, part of that system, someone in that system. So, and I bring up that example to say, so one of the best compliments I ever get from my mother and my sister is, when I talk about things like this, and I challenge them on some of their beliefs. One, I think at Easter brunch was, "What do you mean the sun doesn't give you cancer?" I say, "What? How are you so sure that it would just be the sun? Could it be anything else?" And they say, we want to disagree with Tom, but we really don't do enough research to challenge him. So this is the point, is if you spend your whole life not thinking about what the potential opportunities are, how can you say this is the only way to do it? So with that in mind, with your vocation, with your work, how do you avail people other options, because one note that I wrote down from talking to my wife last night, I thought of streamlines and confines of the system. What are the streamlines of momentum of my mom did it this way, and isn't this the easy way? And then the confines of, well, what does my health insurance cover? And what, my job is tied to my health insurance, and my doctor would do this. And, what if my husband is too afraid, or what if my in-laws are too afraid? So what are some of the ways that you broaden people's perspective on their menu to select from?
Mm.
Yeah,
Ooh.
if you only have one thing on the menu, anything else seems like that's just pure chaos mode. Is a
Mhm.
departure. And I'll round this out by saying what the image that came up when you were talking about going with the crowd. If people listening can imagine the physical feeling, we've all had it. You're walking into a concert, a ball game, airport, whatever, and there's literally that crush of people behind you. It is daunting for anyone to then go say, excuse me, and go push your way past people. That would be, that's what people think of, how dare you, Veda, go against the crowd and, start reading for yourself. Where I am seeing the abundant opportunity for people to experience more freedom is, I'm just going to step out of line. I'm just going over here. And most
Mhm.
people are going to keep walking straight ahead, and maybe they'll say, well, what the fuck is she doing over there? And we're lucky when we get the people who say, Veda, what are you doing over there? And they're asking it with genuine curiosity. Those are
Mhm.
people, those are my easiest connections and relationships. And people say, well, Tom, why are you doing that? Not why are you doing that? So that is the option for people. Is it's not always going against the crowd. You might just start walking over there and have a similar destination in mind. So with that imagery, please, coach us through, how to add some options to the menu.
That was a really great imagery you just gave. And it makes me think too, when you walk in somewhere and you see a line and then people just assume that's what you're supposed to do rather than
Yeah.
actually asking questions about
Yes.
where is the actual front desk, and you just
Mhm.
stand because you're like, oh, well, if everyone else is doing it, then this must be, that, yeah, anyway, how you said that was so perfect. But kind of how it worked for me, I want to say, because I did spend my whole life doing that, is the moment I started questioning basically every belief. This is what I say. I got to a point where I was able to, I Marie Kondoed my mind in a way. If do you know who Marie Kondo is?
I don't. I think I've heard you mention that before, but
You got,
talk to me.
she's just great. She had like one of these like Netflix specials where she like reorganized homes, and her thing was like, you pull everything out of every cupboard, every drawer, every closet, lay it in the middle of the room and pull everything out one by one. And you say, her thing was like, does this bring me joy? And if it doesn't bring you joy, then you thank it for what it's brought you and you get rid of it. So it truly is this, like, to me, I was like, I started doing this with my mind when I started realizing, okay, honestly, like I said, the medical industrial complex really like rocked my world when I started questioning things, the food industry, big pharma, all that stuff. Little things would start coming to me. And the moment I had that irk of like, oh, no, that was the thing that I was like, oh, that means I need to question this. That was my signal that instead of just dismissing it, because it's easy to dismiss, I actually got to sit and have a conversation with that feeling and say, why do I hold this belief? Where was I told this? Is it something I was just told, or do I have any like actual facts to back it up? And if I didn't, instead of saying it's crazy, because a lot of things just kind of sound crazy, I want to say I have a shelf, and I still do, of maybes. You know what? Okay, instead of saying that's crazy, I'm going to say maybe. And now I'm going to kind of live my life looking around and see if things either confirm this hypothesis or say it's not. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I've decided to live my life and start realizing where I'm rooting my decisions. Am I rooting this out of fear, or is it out of love? And I would say most of the time when I have a resistance to something, it's just because I've been told something and I actually don't even know the basis of it, or it's because it's a fear. And now I get to now have a conversation with fear and have that conversation of, is this rooted in truth too? And most of the time it's not, actually. So it's a lot of just unpacking, I want to say, of every little thing. That first feeling of resistance is the one you're like, oh, okay, let's sit here for a minute. That's when there's something else on the menu that you're resisting.
Very much
Yeah.
so.
And if you think it's crazy, because what's actually crazy is there's a whole bunch of people out there doing it, and there's a reason why.
Yeah. Well, that's why your work is so valuable, and you said it as well, Veda, is to go through it and to say, now I have something like a blueprint, and that's usually so daunting for, like you said, the information is one thing, and this is, I think, I'm confident that we are at this point of, especially in the, I'm not going to say alternate, the lawful remedies, lawful practice, natural law. I trust that we are at that breaking point where there are more doers than talkers. Because I mean, it sounds like you came up probably close to the, whatever information was out there was probably close to the peak of people just saying, well, this is maybe not theory, this is just information. And now the question is always, what do we do now? What do we do with this, and how do we practice this? So so if you would walk through the experience of, if I'm a woman who feels limited by, well, my healthcare provider this and my work that, and this doesn't really seem like an option, where do you start with some? And I'm sure this is case by case. People come to you probably with some degree of interest and openness. Thankfully, there is so much more of a conversation now. And I think this is the absolute best of the tools that are social media, is you can cast a wide net. You can scatter the seeds much broader than if it was just people. Because like you said, if you didn't know anyone in your immediate physical sphere who had a home birth or a lotus birth, a free birth, then it's hard to even imagine that it can be done. So let's go right to the pinnacle, the peak of a lotus birth, because you said that is something that is what lights you up the most. And would you please paint that scene for us of what is the magic and the mystery of a lotus birth, and why might people be interested in that?
Yeah. So this was one of those things that was revealed to me in my first birth, for sure, which I felt so called to. So a lotus birth is when you leave the baby, the umbilical cord and placenta attached until it naturally detaches. So when I first stumbled upon it too, I was like, whoa, that's interesting. So I went and immediately I asked my midwife, and she was like, yeah, that's like a thing you hear about. But she's like, I've never known anyone to actually do it. So I started scouring.
No one's been patient enough yet. No, everyone's too impatient.
Do you know what, Tom? It's actually really crazy that I feel like there's so much that I talk about when it comes to birth and kind of like going outside of mainstream. But when it comes in, there's a lot of people that are expansive or open-minded. But when it comes to lotus birth, for some reason, there's like, that's where a lot of people stop. So,
well, this is my, anyone who, and I wrote this down as well. I would say my most potent portal to, especially now, these realms of questioning any inherited belief and starting to explore what it means to be myself and be as human as possible and be as dynamic as possible. The terrain philosophy of health has been, for me, the most impactful, because when I embrace that fully, it says, well, this is part of my body. Like, this isn't a throwaway, and this isn't an inconvenience, and it's not gross, and it's not something that I probably need to take a knife to or a pair of scissors to. So I think, yeah, if people, this is first principles with the vaccine issue as well, is while people might get hung up on the toxicity and it causes autism or whatever, my first principle is there's nothing that injection is going to protect me from. Well, I mean, ostensibly because there's nothing to be protected from. Them, to say nothing of a baby in its first couple days on Earth getting an STD vaccine. I mean, that's just absolute insanity. So all that to say, if people have not gone to those first principles of why would something that was in the womb, part of this baby, it's not something to be treated casually or dismissively. Yeah, if people haven't gone down that route of health, I can see the apprehension, but they've
Yeah.
lost the plot. They're missing the
Yeah.
plot.
Well, and I think we're jumping ahead too, because you mentioned something earlier when we were talking about circumcision. I think your grandfather had said was how in order to do something, you have to first believe inherently that we were born flawed. So I would say the same with a baby. When a baby comes out, and then, whatever minutes later, however minutes later, the placenta comes out and they're born connected. Now we must believe that this design that they were born connected was flawed if we believe that it's our job to disconnect it. Like, where does that come from? Because for
That's it.
me, when I sat and think on the divine design of everything, I couldn't help but think if I were like the first person in the whole world to have a baby. Okay, and I conceive this baby and I grow this baby in trust. And one day, hormones start surging and then a baby comes out. I'd think, oh my gosh, this was perfect. And then moments later, a placenta comes out. I would think, oh my gosh, this is perfect. And then a few days later, it detaches. I would think, oh my gosh, this is perfect. Like, why do we think anything else? Other than programming.
It's a rampant inversion or deception that, and this is why, I mean, I call it a portal, because to then say, well, what is this realm? Is this a totally random, chaotic realm that came from nothing? And that the idea of birth, I mean, or any life, I mean, someone mentioned it the other day. What human do you think planted the first trees? Like, no, there were just trees. There have just been trees. It's not about who planted them. I mean, talk about, capital C creator and divine intelligence. I mean, so I call it an inversion. It's a denial of all of that. And that's why it's worth at some point in our lives getting intensely curious about those first principles. Because if it's being born flawed and disconnected in chaos and randomness, and you come from nothing and you return to nothing, well then good luck, trying to enjoy your experience in this body, because that's a grim proposition. And it doesn't, I don't see it enriching something like the birth experience. I mean, you can be in awe and wonderment and not know. I mean, that's actually a great place to be, instead of knowing every reason why, because you made no conscious effort to gestate, and those things happen. There was some,
Yes.
or to say like that, that seed is the one that now I'm turning into a baby. No, I mean, there's an intelligence beyond us. And so, my grandfather pointing out that point, that who are we to feel like we can improve on God's design? I know that's the era we're in now. Not a lot of good coming from that.
No. Yeah. How many interventions are actually what causes the issues that we're dealing with today? And you mentioned something too just a second ago of like a belief that we come from nothing, we go. But that's what's crazy, I feel like, about Lotus birth and how that sets such an imprint. I want to say it is the first imprint of sovereignty that we have. We come connected, and this placenta, we don't really give it the honor it deserves.
Yes. What is its significance?
I mean, it helped grow your baby. Like, your baby wouldn't exist without this incredible organ that grew specifically for it, right? It's filtering their blood. When it's born, it still has a third of their blood and their stem cells and their oxygen and all these different, of course, physical things that are really important. So letting them receive all of those physical benefits is really important, to leave it attached. And then beyond that, it's a spiritual attachment. Now, there are many ancient cultures which I resonate deeply with, is this concept that this placenta is kind of your baby's guardian angel, in a sense. Where they were born, they came into this realm with your baby, and your baby gets to decide, when am I ready to release this and fully transition earthside? Because you are very much still in the in-between when you're still connected. And I will say, even as a mother, experiencing these with 2 of my babies so far and a third soon, how you still feel, again, like you're still in the cosmos together. And the moment they detach, like, boom, you're both here on Earth. And it is their moment of like, I get to choose when I'm ready to fully transition, and you transition together, and it's so beautiful. This concept that this energy, and although the placenta dies physically, that there is still this energy that you are always being watched out for, protected in the invisible realm. And that this same energy is the one that helps you. They transitioned you here, they transition you into the next, whatever that is. And it's interesting to think that, what do they say? The two fears humans are born with are fear of death and a fear of falling, or something like that. And
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to this, but I will pose the question of, what if that fear was created by that disconnection? What if we always knew we were being watched out for in the invisible realm and didn't have a fear of death because we knew we were being held? I don't know, just a thought. To me, there is a reason beyond money, because of course there's a money incentive for placentas. They sell them for lots and lots of money from your from your baby, the stem cells, the physical aspect of it. But the spiritual aspect of is something that you cannot deny, and it's only something that can be felt too, to feel that being held of what an incredible divine design truly it is beyond the physical a lotus birth does. So yeah, it is to me this belief that this placenta is your baby's life force. And when we do anything else with it, it is stealing that life force.
Especially too, and even if you're not the purveyor of that sale, for it to then be sold, I mean, anything spiritual that someone would think. I mean, yeah, and there are physical elements of spirituality. Yeah, that there's a market around. Same with foreskins. I don't know if there's spiritual significance to. I mean, even just on the physical level. I mean, it's an organ, or it's part of an organ of intimacy, of feeling, and yeah, I mean, for that to then be sold for other people's beauty or prolonged youth or anything like that. I mean, some people might say, what's the big deal? And I'm grateful for my perspective that says that is a big deal, because with your mention of money, I think this is an ideal transition into the conversation of natural law. And as I've learned it, I would now describe it to people as, if we think of this as a system, and a system is just having an organization. What is that which organizes how we go through our lives? And this hierarchy within the organization of natural law is God, man, mankind, womankind, government, or some sort of ruling, if it's self-governance, if it's communal, if it's national, etc., and then corporation, the ability to do business. And there does have to, we bring all of that natural law into that bottom layer of the hierarchy to then, well, if I'm to create material wealth and abundance and sustenance and products and services, natural law is still part of that in that dissension. We have a true inversion of corporations, government, man. And then even if there is an acknowledgement of God, it's probably been supplanted by money as more of a foundation, to that from there. So,
Yes.
so let that be our paradigm shift into talking about how do we concede our sovereignty via the birth certificate first and foremost. And because in the conversation of consent, I think even still, I mean, I continue to grapple with that, is even just saying I do not consent is sometimes not enough, is we are still called to prove our standing and explain ourselves. We don't have to be defensive and combative and pugilistic or anything like that. That's so far beyond our ability to consent for ourselves. Is we, like you said, we're probably still in the cosmos, and our poor mothers and fathers are confronted with a business decision that they're not even privy to the import of that. And so, I mean, because I'm fascinated now by the potential that we have the ability more than ever, Veda, to operate as sovereignties unto ourselves, meaning that we can, I mean, talk about choose how we give birth, choose the, for the most part, choose the quality of our water. I mean, maybe not the sourcing, but we can treat our water. We can manage our own ways of income and relating to people and building together. And I mean, this is an age of potentially more freedom, hence the resistance to it and the stifling of it. And still, it would help, I think, to have some awareness throughout the generations of how can we commence that experience of supreme sovereignty from our arrival on this earth. So what did you learn after you were given that birth certificate to sign about what is it that we sign? What consent does a mother and father give away upon signing the birth certificate?
Ooh, I love everything you just said. Really, I had to start asking myself that question, right? When I'm like, what does this mean? And
You got the gut check of this is a sticking
yeah.
point for me. This doesn't all the good work I did of what it means to be free in the physical birth. This seems to be something that transcends that. What are the implications? So you had the gut check, and
Mm,
then what was sort of what was your next instinct or question to ask?
yeah. Well, and again, it wasn't until my next baby that was like,
Okay.
hey, remember that piece? Now it's your turn to research that, because I got to spend my whole first birth researching and unpacking birth. And now luckily with my second, I now had time to, now this was what I got to research, which I think was a beautiful opportunity for me. Now I'm like, now I know birth. I know all this stuff. I know I'm confident I can have an unassisted birth. That's not something I need to go research. Now there's a whole other, now the legal, the lawful stuff is now, which I never in a million years thought that that's where my path would start going, is like reading law dictionaries and codes, and I never thought that's where I would go. But that was so interesting to me when I started thinking on things as a contract and recognizing what gives these powers the authority in the first place. We actually are consenting on some level, whether, a lot of times it's just subconsciously, but a lot of times they are doing it through our signatures, through us actually signing consent over. So that's really when the birth certificate started coming in. When I'm like, when someone signs a birth certificate, what obligations does that obligate my baby to? And the first thing that came to me was I started realizing that actually I'm opting them into an entire system, like being drafted to war,
Yeah.
that I'm taking away from him. And when I started learning about the monetary system and how things all started working, right? And just researching the birth certificate in general, realizing that birth certificates weren't standard across all 50 states until 1933. Which again is not that long ago. And I don't think it's a coincidence that that's the same time we moved off the gold standard and into full faith and credit, which I am going to just throw in there too, because we had this conversation earlier, is it's the same time births started moving from homes to hospitals, where we started inviting state agents to attend our birth, who are now registering every baby they attended because they had contracts with the state. Like, it all just, I mean, you can say it's a coincidence. Interesting coincidence. Right? And then a few years later was the Social Security Act, where we were all insured, all this stuff. It all just like started making sense to me, how if our entire nation is backed by full faith and credit, that means our entire nation is backed by our future labor and what we're paying in taxes. And reasons, what am I obligating my child to in this scenario? It made sense to me why it felt like I couldn't opt him into a system without his consent. And so when I checked in my body and I was like, hey, I'm going to have two kind of scenarios of, okay, I'm going to get him the birth certificate. How does that feel in my body? Oh, knots. Knowing what I knew, I was like, well, I can't go sign that. So when I thought, okay, I don't get him a birth certificate, my body went at ease. But fears did arise, naturally. So there was that. I'm like, okay, now I get to move to the next level of, now I get to kind of unpack why are these fears coming up and what are they here to show me? And realizing that all these fears are valid, because, a fear of, like I said earlier, inhibiting my child, or what does that mean? Can I prove that I'm the mother if I don't have legal records? Can my kid be taken away from me? All the different
Yeah.
things that I got to confront, which was the blessing of being able to like layer myself and peel back those layers of what is this fear coming to show me, and having a conversation with every single one of those. So that was kind of like my cue of like, and I kind of like to do that with really kind of any decision I make. I'm like, hey, let's play a scenario of I choose this. How do I feel? Say I choose this. How does that feel? And let's go further. So yeah, I'm honestly forgetting your question, and if I even answered
No,
it.
you're on the track. It's just to go. I think that was an essential framework for what is the significance of the birth certificate.
Mm.
And because I joke with people, I only know 2 languages, English and profanity. So since English is the only language that I know fairly fluently, let's take this opportunity to dig into people know it as legalese. It's still
Mm.
words that we can, well, it's words that we think we know.
Yeah.
We think we know what birth means. We think
Mm-hmm.
we know what certificate means. We think we know what note means. We think we know what labor
Money.
means. You're gonna say money?
Money. Yeah.
Yep, yep. And so I will use this opportunity to put on the table what I have come to believe about. We talk about consent. We talk about how to navigate what is lawful under the hierarchy that I laid out versus what is legal. The legal system is mostly based on what is corporate, so that will get us into what is a corporation, what is the corpsoration, what is the voice, what is the figment of a dead body. But all that to say, when we think of consent, I believe that we are given the opportunity to rescind consent when we can prove that we know what we're talking about.
Mm.
When we are able to enter the game with the same tools, tactics, language. And I think, as with anything else, it's imperative to establish some knowledge of the definitions. So for something like birth is, if you're not acquainted with naval operations, maritime law, or even if unless you're a merchant marine. I grew up in New England, so I know merchant marines, and if they hear the word birth, they can think of a child's birth, or they might think of the manifest of what it means when I take this cargo ship from Cape Cod Harbor down to Miami.
Mm.
And I believe that's aligned with the history of birth and certificate. So if you would, Veda, define those words for us, and then we'll put them together and see what that formula produces. So why
Yeah.
birth? Why is it even called a birth certificate, and what are then the legal and economic implications?
Well, yeah, it's so the parallels are just so astounding, honestly, when you compare commerce to birth and the process that it's been moved into, right? I don't even really like the word birth when like you said,
I know.
a birth. So every ship is female, right? A ship
Yes.
carries cargo, they carry a product to be bought and sold. They're on the water. There is this whole concept or parallel to the fact that because you are a product in your mother's waters, you are a product to be bought and sold. So a ship comes in, they come in with their certificate of manifest, which is a birth certificate. Now
Yes.
they can sell this in commerce. It is the same in, you go to the dock, just like a ship comes into the dock. Mother goes to the dock, baby's born from her waters, and now there's a new product to be sold that needs a certificate of manifest, aka a birth certificate, to now recognize that there is a baby on the market to be bought and sold. And there is, that concept of stock. This baby is stock. They are being sold on the market, not just, basically in their labor. They are worth money. The moment someone finds out that a baby is in someone's body, they want them in that system. And that system begins with the birth certificate. That system then continues. We want to get them in a social security fund. We want to insure that baby. Next, we want to get that baby in the school system so they can then learn how to be a really good worker. Then we want to get that baby enrolled in a job so they're paying taxes. It's this whole commercial, everything is commercial. And really, the birth certificate is a business. They've created a business out of every single one of us. And just like you said, this recognition of learning the truth about it allows you to play the game a lot different. And it allows you to remove conscious consent too. Because most of that was, that was a whole just unconscious thing. we didn't consent to it as babies. And to me, first having this awareness that it exists is when you break the spell in the first place. That's really when the magic starts happening, when you're like, wait, I didn't consent, but now I actually get to consciously say no. And now I can still operate this way if I choose to, now that I know that's an option, but there are other options out there. I've just never been taught our avenues of life. So yeah, I think that's where things get exciting.
They do, and still the word is confronting. I mean, that's been a theme for me these last several weeks, to confront beliefs, to confront. And I've had my own experience with this on the lawful and legal front. It is one thing to remove consent. What is our level of preparation then to navigate notices? And I mean, it's where I felt the most fearful is just not being equipped, is just not knowing how to handle various situations. And I have a much better knowledge of that now, not comprehensive knowledge for every situation. So much of it is, though, standing, or our good standing, our honorable standing. I had this experience where we went to the beach a couple weeks ago, and it's the heart of summer, and that we went to a beach that is a resident-only beach, and I figured we'd get a ticket, no big deal. When you see that bright orange envelope on your dashboard, I've definitely had the experience in years past of fucking, just the anger, and it went from, sometimes it's, at least at the beginning, it's anger at yourself, for losing track of time. And then, you start learning a lot of this stuff, and it's anger at them, and how dare they, who do they think they are? I didn't consent to, these rules of the road and all of that. And I'm happy to say that on that last encounter, what I moved through most seamlessly was not a bad guy because I parked here. Like that is with something that small, it's look at that borderline criminal. Well, and criminal is a loose term. I mean, jaywalking is a fucking crime, for goodness sakes. But like, it is under that when the legal system is so dense, and any and everything can be determined to be a criminal act or an illegal act. One of the foundations of good standing is to be in honor, to trust that I'm not doing harm to anyone, I'm not being destructive, I haven't stolen, by my parking here, and there's 25 other spots. It's, if I was taking a spot away from someone who paid their $20 for the day, okay, I get it. But that's part of it too, is, I think it's a massive cornerstone of it is to opt out, to do something differently. It doesn't make us bad. And I've spoken about this frequently on this podcast and with many people in my life, is because from my own personal experience of, if it was just how I was raised or being in Catholic school or school in general, is the language game is we equate, let's say you get the answer wrong with, to a question or on an exam. To be wrong, the opposite is right. So if I'm not right, which means just and good and beautiful and perfect and pure, that means I'm wrong, I'm bad, I'm evil, I'm less than, etc. And those are, people may think I'm being trivial about that. I'm not. That is the subtle reality that plays out to even consider, so what does it mean? All of that to come full circle is, without information, without even the imagination to conceive of freedom beyond, co-signing and resigning ourselves to that life. And yet I did hear someone say recently, which I loved, never let your ideals get in the way of your freedom. And I did love that, because you can, Tom Barnett, who's someone I have tremendous respect for, and he spoke at Confluence 2 years ago when we were both there, and his mantra of everything is an offer is so profound. But he talks about, he said, you can be someone who pays every tax and every parking ticket and every fine and still be a free person, because you're not tethered to, this being having a claim on me. And it can be the opposite, is you can, avoid all the taxes and not write your birth certificate and still feel unfree. So, and so you feel some truth to that?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
I love what you said too, because I've also had to go through all those emotions of when you learn new information. It's like, oh my gosh, it made me mad. I was like, God, burn the birth certificate, burn the social security number, especially with my firstborn, thinking like, oh my gosh, I failed him.
Yeah.
Going through that grieving process of thinking the shame and the guilt and all those different things. But again, beautiful because I get to have a conversation with every single one of those feelings that come up and ask myself, is that why am I feeling this way? Is it true? And then being able, and some people stay there maybe forever, but I think if you keep walking, you'll move through it. And I think what gets exciting is you start realizing, I mean, just like you were saying, you get to choose what brings you the most freedom. And that's really going to be it. Is the most freedom sometimes going to be pay the $50 ticket, or is freedom to you to spend your life in court? The thing is you get to choose. And to me, that's the freedom in a lot of it. And realizing that freedom or sovereignty itself is a vibration that you live at rather than paperwork. Because a lot of people think paperwork and things are going to speak for them. And that's never the case. You have to live at this vibration. It's how you live. It's truly what you believe about yourself. And when a ticket comes to you, what is that first feeling? Is it that I'm a bad person, or can you recognize right away that the guy that gave you that ticket is just an agent of the state and their job is to make money for the corporation? Simply. It's not personal. When you start seeing everything as business and are rooted in who you are, the whole game changes. And like I was saying before, it kind of gets exciting because then you get to choose. Like, I get to choose now how I move forward with this, and I have tools in my toolbox to be able to do so. I can avoid this fine and this ticket by XYZ, or I can just pay $50. I don't know. What do I want to do right now?
Yeah. Yeah, that, and it's all an invitation. It's all an offer to
Mm,
very much how do you choose to engage with that. And still, the the point I'd like to drive home is it does help immensely to have guides with information.
mm,
And thankfully, this is what, like you said, you had that immediate feeling of now that I'm through this, if I can increase freedom for others because that is the massive shift that I'm most excited about and that I'm engaging in because I had this conversation with a friend recently who is an active terrain based and holistic health coach as well, and we just talked about as much as we refer to the departure from externalizing authority and problem solving, what does it mean if someone does hire us as a coach and as a guide?
mm.
And for me, what I tell people is that because my first introduction to health was all the body, being an athlete and getting into when I started personal training, and I was really active in the powerlifting and Olympic lifting worlds. And of course, I mean, if you're to maximize your strength, then that requires a great degree of knowledge of training and uh, supplementation, food, all of that, the whole gamut. And then that led me rapidly into, well, what can I do to bolster my emotional and first it was my mental intelligence. This is the power of the mind. What's my mentality to be able to perform? And I have a much different relationship now to performance and perfection because, and I mentioned this at the start of my presentation, my workshop at Confluence this year, because perform just means through form. It just means embodiment. Perfection, I mean, it just means through what do we continue to pursue our expression. It's not about being flawless. It's not about performance. Is not about then the adulation and applause you get. It's in the doing and using our form to go through that. So any opportunity we get to go through body, mind, emotional, and spirit, then we're most embodied and most human. So I tell people I teach body awareness first, bring you into your body, and from there you will access self-awareness. And that is one of the core notes I had, and I'm glad you're nodding because it is the awareness that is so freeing. When I become more aware of why I'm responding how I am, like I said, I mean, if I continue to stifle that instinct of, well, when I see that orange envelope on my dash, I feel like a bad person. I know I'm not that's not the thing that makes me about. I don't, it really doesn't matter if other people say, "Ooh, that jackass, parked here without paying." Like it's not because it's not avoidance. It's just I made a decision
Mm.
within full awareness that was a potential, like, obviously I know that that's a potential outcome, and I did,
I
and it doesn't
stand by
phase
where
me.
I parked.
Absolutely. Oh, even if it was a conversation, because and she and I talked about this as well. It's like, for all the days that we've gone to that beach and had a magical morning of swimming and reading and talking and tanning and all that, like, it's $40 all day, 10 times over. So
Yeah.
I feel great about that investment, such as it is. But it does start with awareness, and so that's my answer. If I'm thinking about how do I increase freedom for myself, and I give constant credit and gratitude to my friend and teacher Edmund Knighton, who was one of the keynote speakers at Confluence this year, and I'm part of one of his programs again because of all I continue to learn from him. And that's a regular question he has is, how can you increase freedom even 1% today in
Mm,
in your body, not in a theoretical way, not in an intellectual way. So I'll pose that to you,
love
Veda,
that.
as we get ready to sail this boat into harbor, as we get ready to land the plane here. Just off the top of your heart, how do you feel like you increase freedom for yourself?
Ooh, that is such a good question.
So glad I didn't send that to you before.
How I feel like I can increase freedom is just continuously becoming more aware of the responses and reactions that come up in my life. Uh, for me too, I want to say every pregnancy I've had has been so, gosh, eye opening and revealing to me about self. And every baby has been like, okay, another layer, another layer. And here I am, 37 weeks pregnant with my third baby. And the things that are coming up for me in this pregnancy, I think is so beautiful that I'm becoming more and more aware of my beliefs or, whatever. I think that brings more freedom when I'm able to even see what's coming up for me in every facet of my life and how I can become just more aware of how I'm driving my reality. Uh yeah. So I don't even yeah. That's such a wonderful loaded question, and it's funny because before I even started this conversation with you, I'm like I was saying I'm 37 weeks. I'm feeling like I swell. That is like my this is what I'm feeling a lot in this
The heat,
pregnancy, and I've
yeah.
really been able to deep dive this physical thing within this pregnancy, the feelings that are coming up, the body things that are showing me what it means has been so beautiful. I'm not going to say it's not hard because I'm like really peeling back layers on things, but that's, I feel like, ultimately giving me more freedom because I'm able to become so much more self aware. And I love that my babies do that for me. Honestly, pregnancy is like this fast track to like, do you want to bring every freaking thing up? You can either take a pill and then just decide it doesn't mean anything, it just happens with pregnancy, or you can say, oh, wow, what is this here to show me? And all my babies have beautifully shown me so much about myself, and I'm really grateful for that. So I love being able to take the physical, the emotional things, and letting them reveal to me what I believe, and allowing that to bring more freedom, I would say.
Well said, beautifully said. And I would be remiss if I didn't visit the aspect of this conversation that, you do have your family around you. I I would invite your definition first and foremost of conscious conception, because I still don't know if that's a common phrase in the lexicon right now, and all words have different meanings to different people. That's usually how it goes. So let's start there. When you talk about conscious conception, how do you define that?
This is a great question too, because all three of my pregnancies and conceptions have been very different. When I first conceived my firstborn, it very much was a surprise. And so to me, I was like, this was not conscious. I
Yeah.
certainly, again, didn't even think I could have kids. So it was like, that was not conscious. I got to have conversations, with my baby though, saying, hey, that had everything to do with me and not with you. You are so loved. You are so wanted. My second baby was very much, we called the soul in, we felt the soul, we called this baby in. And like I said, never took a pregnancy test or anything like that because we knew, we really leaned into this trust, this knowing this baby was joining us. My third baby, we have always planned. We planned on this baby, but we planned on this baby maybe a year down the road. And when this baby came, it was so interesting because it was not in my ovulation window, which is so interesting. The more and more I'm more convinced that when a baby is supposed to come, like spontaneous
Yeah.
ovulation will happen because it was meant to be. So my thought too, I kind of went through these feelings of like, oh my gosh, I didn't like consciously conceive this baby because I didn't call the soul in at this very moment. But then I kind of reframed my thought process of like, this baby actually was always wanted. And just because it wasn't in my time frame and I trust that divine process so deeply that I still consciously conceived this baby because that baby was living and breathing in the ethers. Because I did plan this baby, you know what I mean? And even if you don't, like I said, with my very first, I don't, yeah. I will just say this third pregnancy has changed my thought or belief about what I believe a conscious conception is. Because I still believe this baby was consciously conceived, even though it wasn't. I'm calling this soul in, which I will say is such a magical thing to be able to do, is say, I'm planning for this baby. This is how we're planning. But to me, it's just knowing that these souls are coming through you. They're trusting you and to trust yourself in that conception of bringing forth this soul ultimately. So yeah, those are kind of been my three experiences.
Well, I appreciate the humility, Veda, especially for this third, because yeah, I mean, I don't have I don't have an exact definition of consciousness, but again, the idea of consciousness, a creative force, for us to say that the conception was conscious, it's not always about what we do with every fiber of our intention. Like you said, I mean, there's a consciousness, perhaps capital C consciousness that had a plan for this baby to come to you and your husband. And this is the place where I'd love to bring it home to just talk about the dynamic of family and partnership, because as we were mentioning beforehand, and it still feels alive to bring this up, I'm intimately aware that what kept me so long from the noble adventure and commitment of marriage was just being in my head about it, was just thinking too much about all the unraveling, all the false beliefs, and all the good work that I was doing on myself and had to do. And when you're communing with that on a regular basis, which is the awareness journey, which is how often can I access more parts of myself that, especially if I can unburden myself of the things that limit me or bring me false sense of fear or anything like that, then we're more liberated. Then and part of it was looking at my parents and their marriage devolve, and that makes you look at other relationships, and you just become, I think, or I can speak for myself, I became more aware of my own frailties and weaknesses and opportunities for growth. And it just made me think, not feel or know or trust, who am I to be even a solid or good husband, and then what would that mean to be a father? Because I'm thinking I would rather all of that be as conscious as possible, rather all that be as clear to me as possible. And yet I have enough, thankfully, men who are in the crucible of fatherhood and being husbands and being men on this path as well, who said, we're also, even someone like Edmund, of course, who's many years up the road than I, just in life and experience. And he says it's all the time. It's all the time where we slip and we fall, and we have these women and these families who hold us accountable. And it's only, I feel I'm at my best when I'm able to reconcile those things. Like, if it's one thing if someone who's having a bad day on the tennis court, takes it out on me, or says that I'm being whatever, or if someone projects on me that doesn't know me intimately, I'm pretty good about not taking that to heart. It's different when I'm getting the dissonance from my wife or a loved one, and then I use those as opportunities to build. And I'm so grateful I did, because it has absolutely enriched my life to be in a different state, to be in a different standing with her in this life. And so, if I had a question about all of that, it's can you share just your story, or how you conceptualize, or how you feel the story has evolved with each phase, having a husband in your life, a love in your life. Now he's a father. Now you're a man, because these are different roles we all wear. And they, of course, ask us to evolve ourselves. I mean, I was thinking about this earlier, that, in terms of growth, I feel like if I'm having a good day by this time, by 2 o'clock in the day, I feel like I've lived 3 lifetimes. Especially talking to you, I feel like I've lived 12 lifetimes. Just imagining all the different experiences that you've had, and that, all have some fractal of. So, how are you looking on this story as it has evolved? I mean, how do you give credit to and appreciate your husband and your other children? And
Mm.
if we can use I just an opportunity to tell that side of the story, to inspire other people who might be too in their heads about, who am I to have a family and have it be great and beautiful. Veda seems like she's having fun. How do we
Yeah.
make that fun and engaging for ourselves?
Oh my gosh, this one's so good. To me, life, I'm realizing, is about a whole bunch of initiations, and seeing them as initiations. And what's so cool about each one of those initiations, like when I first met my husband, having that initiation, and deciding we wanted to get married and commit to that next level, what's so interesting is once you make that conscious decision, parts of you suddenly that didn't exist before or lay dormant, maybe suddenly now they have an opportunity to come forward. And both of you realize who you are, how you respond to certain things now that you've gone through this initiation, which continue to be initiations, which are so beautiful. I think especially if you pick someone like yourself, the way that I hear you speak on how every scenario is a way that I get to dive deeper into self and awareness and all of that. Um, I mean, you just barely said that. You're like, when I have a confrontation with my wife, that lets me dig deeper. And maybe that conversation, that scenario probably never would have ensued unless you had that initiation first. Things become alive. So that I've loved that initiation with my husband, how we've both been able to evolve together. We certainly are not even the same people that married each other 10
Yeah.
years ago, which is the best thing about it, is seeing how many like death and rebirths we've had even within our own relationship. And then the initiation of my first baby, the things they initiated me to, and the death and rebirth that I've been able to experience there. And again, now each birth that I'm having, these death, all of these initiations, which I feel like are the walking through fire and coming out the other end and evolving, that you constantly, for me, this is my personal experience to answer your question, of constant meeting your edge and then finding you can go beyond it. And then you find a new edge, and then you find you can go beyond it, which is cool if you can take that self-responsibility to keep evolving rather than blame or anything else. I think that's the most powerful thing I want to say, even in the term. I know sovereignty gets thrown around so often, but to me, that it truly is taking that full responsibility of everything in my life is me. And I either get to evolve and continue to move past my edge, or I get to stay here and call this my edge and blame why I can't move on. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how else to say that the constant initiations are what propel you to the next. And it's fun to see what comes up in each one of those initiations that you never would have had the opportunity to have unless you were in a scenario being a married man now. You know what I mean? And it's so weird how different it can be just from dating, because now there is this new chapter, this new level. You've entered a new level, and it's constant just levels that are fun.
It sounds fun to me. I mean, you make it sound fun. You make it look fun. I'm sure it has its. I know it has its griefs and its pains and all that. But that is initiation, and that's so brilliant that you used that word to describe it, because I mean that is how it sounds. Birth is an initiation, and then every opportunity thereafter to go within, because then from within, that's how we show up to
Yeah.
enliven our experience with other people.
What I do
And
have to say too on this topic of, I feel like birth has taught me so much about life in general. And I feel like I compare birth to life in so many different aspects when you start realizing the contractions of, birth just itself, how it's productive. You realize it's a lot of sensation, it's a lot of intensity. And then to be able to compare that you can breathe through it, you can go through this initiation and it comes with this incredible expansion later. Really being able to see in life where you're going through life contractions and where you're going through life expansions, and comparing those feelings of, I mean, like I said, I feel like birth, I say it to my husband all the time. I'm like, okay, we're going through this contraction. Remember in this moment that it's productive, even though it feels hard and it feels intense. Again, I would never say that birth is painful. People can label it that way, but to me, it's intense because it's propelling you towards something, to see it in life and be like, oh my gosh, we're going through that contraction right now. Let's breathe through it and continue to trust that it's productive, that everything that's happening is for me and not to me. And then also that the expansions can be uncomfortable too. And just like in birth and labor right now, I'm definitely in the expansion, and it's definitely in that uncomfortable of, phases in your life too, where you realize these clothes don't fit anymore. I can either keep trying to stay uncomfortable putting old clothes on, or I can go do the new thing that's scary. So I don't know. I think having a baby, giving birth, and my husband says all the time, he's like, I kind of wish I got to experience what you get to experience, because he says to me, it seems like I get to move through life with deeper trust because I've had those deep experiences of such intense opportunities to trust. So I would say any woman too. This is kind of just my 2 cents here. If you have the opportunity that a baby gifts you to feel every sensation and every moment and every feeling that gestation, birth, and becoming a mother and father give you, not to skip any of those initiations. Because I see so clearly how getting an epidural or getting induced and all of those things can feel easy because you're skipping the hard part, but that is the initiation. Just like in life. Like you
yes,
have to go through the hard lessons, the slip ups and the mistakes to then become more refined, right? So I don't know, any person with the gift of opportunity to have a baby, like dive into it and live every feeling, breathing moment of it, because it's such a gift. So
thank you for that wonderful pattern interrupter of looking at more of life as birth, because we do have a death culture, and there's so much talk about whether it's ego death or you have to die to your old self. And I like, you just crystallized that for me, how much more of a fixation we have on things dying. Let that old relationship die, and there's not as much of a focus on birth. And your husband's sentiment about wishing that he had the experience that you have of being able to trust more deeply because of your birth experience. I said something similar to my friend Lauren Boudet, and she said, "Never say never." So,
life will give you an opportunity.
since I want to do things out of order, Veda, it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to host you. Before I really bring us home, do tell people, as if they need any more reason to work with you or seek you out, please describe how it is that you serve the world and where people can find you. We'll absolutely link to the Born Free Blueprint and all of your resources, but any way that you'd like to communicate that, please do so.
Yeah. So in quick, easy terms, I guess I help mothers and fathers have babies out of the system and then raise them without a birth certificate, without a social, but still raise them in a way that they can function in society, right? I teach you how to get your lawful records that replace the birth certificate, get a passport without the birth certificate that allows them to do really anything they want in life. And that even includes if later they decide in their life they choose the birth certificate. We as mothers and fathers get to help facilitate that. So that's really, I guess, the gist of what I help families do. And you can find that on vedarevival.com. That's my website. I'm also most active on Instagram. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, that's where you'll find me. It's veda.revival. So yeah.
Not easy to do to describe what it is that we do for work, and work is different than a job, as people who have read a law dictionary know. Your rapid fire finish, Veda, since this is home court health, what is something you've done lately or in general to improve the quality of your home environment?
To improve the quality of my home environments. Oh, this sounds so silly, but honestly, I've just been trying to honestly just trying to keep it clean, keeping a
Yes.
space, because anytime it becomes cluttered, it's my life definitely reflects that. So taking time every single day to clear clutter, because my life reflects that, especially too as I enter this birth portal. It become very, and I understand now especially why mothers start nesting in a way, because it's what environment do I want to bring this baby into the world? That's been very high on my list of priorities, is what my space feels like constantly. So yeah.
It's necessary. I was just on a feng shui kick because for various reasons, as we prepare to shift our own sense of environment. I mean, I'm throwing out old calendars. I mean, there's so many things that we accrue, and it's a trope because it's true, just how much we collect. And think of the percentage of things that you actually use on a regular basis in your home. It's a staggeringly low percentage. So unnecessary move. Is there a court or an arena or a field of play where you feel like you're most active? It's not necessarily about competition. I asked this question in the frame of court, just where you feel that you are experiencing your edge more and more. I mean, that is the whole point of having athletic pursuits or challenges or these kinds of hobbies that really bring out the best in us, our own form of excellence. Yeah. So is there any container in which you're experiencing that these days?
Physically, for sure. I'm gonna stand up and show
Yeah.
you how big this
Yeah, kid.
is right now.
Yeah, kid.
It's physically right now, because I've got a 3 and a 5-year-old that still want to be
Yeah.
held constantly, and I feel physically I'm definitely, but I'm also learning my body to learning my bound. I don't know, and learning to go past that edge to physically, to show up physically for my babies. I think for me constantly it's this awareness that I'm on the edge of a chapter where my little ones want to be held, and they're not going to want to be held forever. So I'm saying yes to every opportunity, and knowing that it's also hard too, but I'm not going to regret it. So I think, yeah, I'm just very much in a physical, trying to prepare my body physically is where I would say right
Oh, you're
now.
gonna have a great. I know you're gonna have a great nap after this.
Yes.
And our finale is to ask, what's something you've stopped doing or
Mm.
begun doing for your health that has made a positive impact?
Interesting. So something that's I've been doing recently is called bowspring. Have you heard of bowspring or no?
No.
That's just been a new thing that this baby has guided me to, on learning how to create more space between my ribs and my hips, and kind of rechanging my entire posture, really, and creating more fascial movements in a new way that I haven't done before, which is, yeah, that came to my radar about three-ish months ago, that I'm okay, that's the thing my baby's wanting me to do. So that's been a practice that I've been implementing, is bowspring. So
Phenomenal. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm steeped in a quest of pretty much just better movement. Anything I do is to play better, to feel better, and that usually requires just, again, a greater holistic awareness of things that we overlook, like our ribs being spaced comfortably from our hips, and how that connects to our spine. And we realize that there is no separation. It is all holistic. It is all whole. The peerless, the matchless, the singular, the inimitable Veda Ray. Thank you so much. It's been lovely to see you. I know I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.